view into a Nollywood movie. And something I spoke about doing previously, because I've started to return to Nollywood. And I think there's a lot of choice and a lot of very interesting things to watch. Um, I'm giving you my perspective as a layperson. I'm not an entertainment or movie critic in no shape or form. So this is really things that have moved me, I found interesting or educational, and I believe you may also find a good pick of something to watch. And I'll also throw it out there to add that we're doing it on the CornerSpeak channel, which I regard as my catch-all channel. Generally, politics, breaking news. If I do persist with these reviews, do more in the future, probably going to move on to the CornerSpeak CBC, the music channel, or my CornerSpeak 360 channel, which is more entertainment based. So, without any further ado, we'll dive straight in. Well, almost straight in. I want to start with um, some leading about the movie, and of course the title of the said movie, which is The Elsin Oba, the King's Horseman. And what really attracted me to this movie while I was flicking through Netflix was the fact that it was set in a certain period that we don't really hear much about when it comes to history. And I think it gave a good insight into, just visually, it wasn't perfectly accurate. It did enough to kind of give people a suggestion and an idea of what things looked like back then. It was set in the 1940s. That's during the period of World War II. And I found growing up, I didn't really hear much when it comes to history about what was going on in many of the colonial countries, apart from the Middle East. And also, you don't really hear too much about the many countries and soldiers from all over the Commonwealth and the Empire who fought for the United Kingdom. We hear very little of that. So, seeing a movie that was set in that period, I thought gave a little insight as far as that's concerned. To open up, I'll give you some info from Wikipedia. So, Elsin Oba, the King's Horseman, is a 2022 Yoruba language Nigerian historical drama. So it came out a couple of years ago. Directed by B. Bandele, RIP. He passed away, I think, several years back now. So RIP to him. And distributed by Netflix, based on Wole Soyinka's death and the King's Horseman, a stage play he wrote while he was in Cambridge. Very interesting. Didn't know that. Where he was a fellow student at Churchill College during his political exile from Nigeria. And just to throw it out there, I watched the Netflix version. So there is Yoruba language in the movie. The Netflix version is the version I watched, which I don't know, might be slightly different from the original, linguistically speaking, where he was a fellow student at Churchill College during the political exile from Nigeria, and it is based on a real incident that took place, based on a factual story originally, in Yoruba land during British colonial rule. The film stars, for those of you who are familiar with the Nollywood casts and the leading actors in these movies, Odulade Adekola, apologies for my pronunciation as well, as the titular character, with Shafe Bello, Baimo Deyemi Akanlanwan, Omo Wumi Dada, Jidi Kosoko Langley Kirkwood, and Joke Silva, amongst other supporting roles. Now, I just have to say, somebody who was raised, educated, first generation Nigerian heritage, British born. Yes, that's the my excuse for my inability to pronounce things probably in the way they normally would be. Yeah, I find that funny too. So, without much further ado, I'm not going to play too much of the trailer because I don't want to spoil it. This review's really for those of you who haven't actually watched the movie yet and might be looking for something interesting, entertaining, or educational to watch from the Nollywood arena. So, just to open, I'll give you a little bit of a look-see into what the visuals were like. Great costumes. As the movie opens up, you start to see the connection with that period of time. And again, like I said, that's what really drew me to the story and watching it. And as it unfolded, it really got me thinking about that whole colonial era and what was going on in parts of Africa, in particular Nigeria. Because as I said, I don't really get much info, and I definitely didn't when I was growing up historically about what was going on in those parts of the world. I'll tell you a brief story. So, as kids, we used to go back home, go to Nigeria at least once a year, usually around Christmas period in time. And there was one Christmas, I was probably 8 or 9, 10, can't quite remember. And I was speaking to an uncle of mine's, and as a young lad, little boy, I was fascinated by anything to do with weaponry, swords, knives, guns, just that kind of male kid type of interest. So my uncle took me to his where he lived to show me his rifle, and then we got talking about war, and he told me the story about his participation in the Second World War, and that kind of like really kind of shook me up for a moment because it just seemed the context, there was nowhere to place it, because as I grew up in the UK in school and looking at history, we all taught a certain amount about the First World War. Rarely are we told about how many African countries participated fighting for the Commonwealth on the side of the United Kingdom, and they definitely aren't praised or remembered as far as these things go. All right, so we've just had a little moment with my camera, so I'm not gonna lose faith, and we'll continue on as a faceless review of this movie as it goes. So anyway, like I said, I'm gonna give you like my take, my point of view, my perspective on this movie. If you just give me a moment. And like I said, it's my opinion. I'm no movie reviewer or anything like that, and I'm kind of fairly new to Nollywood as well. It's a while back I was took an interest in some Nollywood movies, more the action, on the action side. Then I left it alone for a while, and I've kind of come back to it because I've noticed there's a lot more choice of storylines. The quality of actors, actresses, and production has just like music coming out of the continent. It's really leveling up with the rest of, that side of entertainment industry, Hollywood, etc. So, just from my initial assessment, I'd say this movie, The King's Horseman, Alessin Oba, it has tradition, has death, tragedy, colliding with culture, tales of sacrifice in a variety of forms. Not to throw in too much of a spoiler, the main theme is around the lesson, the King's Horseman, and him having to carry out a particular tradition after the king has passed, he has to take, go through a sacrificial ceremony and take his life. And this is where the colonial system came into conflict with the traditions at that point in time. And the upsetting thing, I would say, that caught me at certain parts of the movie is when you hear the traditions or the people described as savages and barbaric, and comes back to that thing of, when the colonial overlords tended to describe something they couldn't understand or, didn't really believe in, clashed with their Christian view, they just writ it off as these people are, have small intellects and are basically uncivilized, as we soon over time realized that was not really worth the bread it was buttered on. So you got loyalty, as far as the King's Horseman being a loyal servant to his king, and the fact that the tradition requests for him to take his life. And there's another interesting bit in the early part of the movie that as he was beginning this ceremony, embarking on it, he spotted a beautiful lady amongst the female villagers, and that kind of interrupted the flow because that became his last wish and desire before departing from the earthly realm. So a marriage was hastily arranged and almost interrupted by the governor. And I'm not going to spoil it too much more. That's where things really heated up, where when the governor and his wife came into the mix. I'd also say there's quite a few funny parts, mixed in with a fairly serious subject matter, and a lot of good music, entertainment, and as far as my layperson eyes can tell, accurate enough depiction of the settings, the costumes, and some of the behavior in that period of time. So, set in a period of Africa and global history, rarely spoken about, as I alluded to earlier, in the colonial versions of how the world was seen during the Second World War specifically. There's even a bit of a love story intermingled within the narrative, as well as many well-timed jokes, which I just mentioned. You could say it was dark humor with some lighter comical moments woven in. What else can I say? Great costumes, though I won't vouch for the accuracy, looked convincing enough to my simple eyes. A subtle mix of modern social media savvy kind of generation type banter. There's a scene at the governor's ball where you had some of the local African dignitaries, these two sisters, and it's funny because some of the colonial masters were dressed in traditional garms, although there was an incident where the governor and his wife was wearing a funeral costume, and I don't think they knew or cared that was disrespectful to the locals and the culture. It was a bit of fun for them, I guess. And these two sisters are dressed in 16th 17th century like English sort of lord and lady type garms, you could say. The language and phrases drew me back to some of the way I used to hear my parents talk when, there's this thing, or at least with some African parents, from a first generation perspective, they would use a lot of parables and talk in a lot of kind of biblical sounding riddles at times. But as you get older, you're able to extract a lot of useful life's lessons from some of these simple phrases. So that really got me synced into the whole storyline and narrative. On an educational score, I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10, because for me, it opened my eyes to a lot of interesting, like I said, period aspects of our history or global history or Africa's history as far as the colonial periods are concerned. and kind of just gave, even if some of it might have been given artistic license, at least a sense, visual sense of what things looked like back then and how people interacted. You had the local cultures getting on with their business and living their lives. You had the overlords and the governors and the hierarchy of people below them. Like there's police inspector and the way he interacts with his bosses and his local community, full of laughs. So jokes wise, I'll give it an 8, virgin on a 9. Entertainment value, easy 9. Production compared to other movies I've seen and dramas, I'll give it an 8.5. And when it comes to casting and choice of cast, I've seen a lot of the actors in other movies I've been watching of late. So I've been able to kind of gauge their abilities, in different contexts, in a modern movie, love story, something more kind of action based. And sometimes I like to watch a period movie and still see a little bit of today's ness coming out of the being expressed by the characters. So I'd give them a pass on that front. I'd say a 9 for casting the right kind of actors and actresses in the different roles. Overall, it's a big yes, and I would say a must watch coming from me, Onyege, here at CornerSpeak. So that's kind of most of what I've got to say about Alesin Oba, the King's Horseman. I think it gives the viewer a glimpse into how two cultures interact, back then, really back in the day, despite the very tricky dynamics of, a colonialized society and culture subjected to living under European overlords with a very warped idea of traditions. I would say they were attempting to change and often destroy things they didn't fully understand. There's a scene where the Elleson's son returns from Europe, England, Oxford or Cambridge, and I believe he was kind of mentored to a degree, as far as mentoring would go across cultures back then, by the governor and his wife, because they mentioned, oh, you've grown up so much when you were a boy, etc., etc. So he's gone over to the UK to study medicine, and he's returned. Coincidentally, well, not so much coincident, he was informed that his king had passed away, so he knew what was coming next as far as his dad's role is concerned. And this, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a very key narrative to do with his dad, the tradition, the whole story behind the movie, and something that happens with his prodigal son returning just at that point in time. Plays a key role in the twist of the story. Anyway, as I said about the son, implied sort of, he'd been to England, been away studying, and this is during the war period, remembering that. So he's got to see the West probably not at its best, because that was a brutal, very, like, you could say, cruel period in time. So with all the preaching and things that was Christianity and the rest that was brought over to Africa, trying to civilize the savages, or however they described it, he got to see, and through first-hand experience, what the culture that was trying to re-educate him, what they were like across the classes, not just the higher classes that were sent over to run these Commonwealth colonial countries. Anyway, so he studied as a doctor in Europe and then returned. And he actually says at one point, he said something like, Europeans are portrayed as civilized, and he could clearly see it was very much what was lacking from the ideals they preached to their colonial however you'll describe servants, describe the population as, them as masters, going to great pains to impose their culture on a culture that was thousands and hundreds of years old, and regarding anything they didn't understand as savagery, he got to see the European version of savagery firsthand. So just to recap, the film was made by Ebony Live Films and Netflix, based on a play and set in the 1940s Nigeria, directed by B. Bandele. Nigeria under colonial rule was the setting, and the plot was ritual suicide. Not as macabre as it may, may seem like it is based on the title and all that. But overall, I'd say it was a very entertaining, fascinating to a degree movie. Kind of taught me or gave me an impression, left me with an impression of what Africa and Nigeria in particular might have been like during that 1940s wartime period. And I would definitely say go watch it if you got the inclination and got the time. So before we wrap up, I want to quickly say, if you're based in the UK and want to hire a live band or solo act, if you're putting on an event,
people together in pubs across the country
are the people to look to for your entertainment needs. They'll provide everything for you. They'll sort it all out, do a bespoke setup if that's what you need, or if you're a pub, restaurant, bar, and you just want regular bands booked, it's all done through their app. They'll take care of all of that. So have a look, and their information would be in the description. So check them out.
Is handpicked, auditioned live by our team. We've heard them, we've seen them, we know they deliver. No backing tracks, just real live music, where the music can never be questioned. Every artist occasion, a Sunday brunch set, or a luxury hotel lounge, elegant and timeless. Book your business today. Our elite artists have been bringing people together in pubs across the country since 2010. Indie, pop, jazz, Motown, soul, classic rock. Solos, duos, trios, and bigger bands. Added to the roster by audition only. Search Elite Artists on the App Store or Google Play today.
So there you have it. I hope that I get the opportunity to do some more of these reviews, and or just call it my take on some very interesting Nollywood movies. Oh, another thing I want to throw out there is, give me a moment to make some adjustments here. Yeah, what I wanted to show you is we now have our CornerSpeak gym bags. Very handy, very lightweight. You can even use them to do your grocery shopping if necessary. So if you want one of these, you can put in an order through the contact info in the description. And just to add, we also have the first of our t-shirts. So it's got our call to action phrase on it, which I'm about to remind you of. Be good, be safe, be creative. And there you have it. Before we check out, I would just like to say a quick thank you from me for taking a minute to spend some time with us here at CornerSpeak with my first Nollywood movie review, a lesson about The King's Horseman. If you have a moment and want to check that out, if you haven't seen it already, and check out some more of Bollywood. There's a lot of it on Netflix and some other networks. A lot of great stuff to see for your entertainment, education, and generally takes you somewhere else for a moment. So it's been nice spending time with you. As I said, I'll move these entertainment type reviews onto one of my other channels in future if I continue doing them. CornerSpeak CBC, that's the music channel, and CornerSpeak 360 is the kind of a second catch-all channel, which is a bit more leaning in the entertainment direction. For now, I would just like to thank you once again spending time with myself here on this Nollywood subject. If you have anything to say, please drop me a line in the comments. I generally get round to all of them and I will respond to you. Suggestions for future shows, any subjects you would like covered, or if you want to jump on a live stream with me and go back and forth on something that means something to you. Or if you watched a very interesting Nollywood movie, don't be shy. Give it a try. If you want to, if you've got something to say, I'm happy to listen. Until then, I'm gonna see you again at some point here at CornerSpeak. For now, please like the video if you find it entertaining. If you haven't yet subscribed to CornerSpeak. Till then, be good, be safe, be creative if you can. For myself, Onyu Edye, right here, right now, I'm out.